Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our corner of the web today. My name is Dan Novak, and this is Dynamic Worldwide Training Consultants. We appreciate you stopping by. Today, we'd like to take a moment and try and take a little bit of the mystery that's associated with the cloud. What is the cloud? How can it benefit us? What are some of the fears that people may have associated with it? Are they founded or are they unfounded? Is it actually that basket with a balloon attached to it that people are throwing all of their stuff in and so, oh, we're storing our stuff in the cloud, as they do in that commercial? Not bad. Not bad at all. Well, for all intents and purposes, today is going to be a learning solution where we're going to just simply talk about what are we going to do about all of our IT infrastructure, all of our solutions, and how can the cloud help us. So, to begin with, we're going to go through a couple of things here today. We'll talk a little bit about cloud computing and what that actually means. We'll talk about Windows Azure, which is Microsoft's solution for the cloud. We'll talk about the many different types of cloud services that you can take advantage of and outsource, which is interesting. I say the word outsource because still you're doing it, okay? We're also talking about websites. How can I make my developer's life a lot easier? For what we are dealing with today with most of our developers, they are building websites. They are going out of their way to configure machines because since they're the ones that are the smartest about those solutions, they manage the IIS server. Some of them manage the SQL server and the databases. They deal with all kinds of different things. Wouldn't it be awesome if we can make their job developing websites? And that's it. And not have to worry about all those other elements. We'll talk about virtual machines. How deeply do I want to go as far as putting my infrastructure into the cloud? Do I just want to deal with services? Hey, take care of these services for me. Or do I want to go out of my way to literally replicate my entire infrastructure and mirror it, so to speak, in the cloud? Most people have a tendency to look at the cloud as saying, well, that's just simply my data center. And for all intents and purposes, it is. The question is, how much do you want to do to manage that data center, and how much do you want to let your vendor, in this case Microsoft, handle that for you? We'll talk about the different workload options that we have available to us. Not simply just virtual machines, but what other types of elements can we put into the cloud? And then we'll talk about the fact that nobody has a tendency in this day and age to run right out and buy the new model year, on the off chance that you're dealing with the lemon. Now, of course, the cloud has been around for an incredibly long time, but from this standpoint, a lot of us like to, just test the waters. We're going to tiptoe into the cloud. And so we're going to find ourselves saying, well, let's just do these things in the cloud, and I want to handle the rest of it in-house. I'm not ready to put my data up there, maybe. I want to do email up there. Or I'm going to keep AD, my Active Directory, on premises in my office, and then I'm going to put some of the services that I'm going to use to provide the applications for my internal employees. I'm going to put that in the cloud, okay? So, to begin with, let's talk a little bit about how cloud computing actually works and what it brings to the table. As you can see, in this little area here at the top, we're talking about, in one case, on-off type of batch processing. When I have servers in my environment, I have SQL servers, I'm running crazy jobs. We've all looked and done baselines in the IT world, and we've said, this point in time, we know that these servers are going to be running hot. They're going to be high in processor utilization. They're going to, maybe it's backup, maybe there's SQL batch jobs that are running. And then the rest of the day, I'm down to about 12% utilization on my CPU and hardly any RAM at all. So this inactivity period that we're talking about here, I still own that, don't I? It's one of those areas where we've just simply decided and accepted the fact in IT that I'm paying for full-time computation, whether I use it or not. And so one of the cool things about the cloud is it's a very pay-as-you-go type of scenario. When I'm not doing a whole heck of a lot, it's not really costing me nearly as much. And that's one of the wonderful things to play around with. Growing fast. Our organizations out there are going to actually be growing leaps and bounds in some cases, slow growth in some cases, but the question is, can I afford to let my infrastructure, my IT infrastructure, keep me from growing as fast as I want to? IT should never hinder growth. And so what you can do is in the cloud you have immediate provisioning of scale-out servers, scale-out services. It's a matter of a click in most cases where you can say, you know what, we only had 2 web servers on a load balance scenario, and then all of a sudden our business started booming. Okay, run over there, log into Azure, do me a favor and fire up 3 more instances for me, and you're back in 5 minutes, okay? The ability to scale up like that gives us an opportunity to stay ahead of our business needs. Unpredictable bursts. Different, I mean, we can look at tax here, okay? My guess is most of those online companies that are going out of their way to allow you to log in and do your taxes online might have a little bit more activity right about now than they do, say, in July or December. Those aren't the times when we start going online to take care of taxes. So you have to worry about either the predictable or unpredictable bursts in the data or in the computation that's taking place on our servers. So for all intents and purposes, I may find out that last night we got a whole bunch of people on our website. Did my website slow down? Or did Azure fire up another couple of servers to handle that for me? It's an option. It's one of the things that we can actually do, and it's one of the great things about working in the cloud. I can have it automatically scale those up for me versus finding out the next day when I came in and read my web logs that all of a sudden the website slowed down because tons of people showed up at my website. So predictable and unpredictable bursting provides, or actually tells us how important it is for us to be able to scale up and then possibly scale back if we need to. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward. Now, these 3 words, these 3 acronyms we've seen time and time again. And as a matter of fact, if you walk down the street and you start asking everybody, what is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service? What is that? What are we talking about? You will likely get several different answers, and it's not because nobody knows, it's because it's been constantly redefined over the years. And in most cases, all this really does is describe what in fact you've chosen to purchase as far as your cloud services are concerned. So let's give it a little bit of a breakdown. Infrastructure as a service basically means Microsoft is going to be my full-blown data center. My AD is in the cloud, my virtual machines, my websites, whatever the case may be. About the only thing that I'm doing locally in my own office is handling the desktops that are logging into the cloud anyways. Okay? They're pretty much doing everything. You're talking about having virtual servers instead of virtual servers or physical servers on premise. You have it all in the cloud. Now when you get to platform as a service, that's a little bit different. Now, I don't want to have to go to my log online to Azure and then remote desktop into all the servers that I just replicated into the cloud. I have SQL servers, I have database servers, I have SharePoint servers. They're all virtual machines that I can remote desktop into, and I'm managing those myself. That there is infrastructure as a service. What we're talking about now is really just the platform. I don't want a web server. In this case, I've decided I actually want a web role. I want IIS running. I basically said, you know what, instead of building a virtual machine out there in the cloud, I would like it very much, Microsoft, if you would allow me to upload or publish my website to your web server. Okay? And maybe give me 3 or 4 instances of that. And by the way, if it's not too much trouble, if you see a lot of activity, throw a few extra instances on there to make sure that I'm okay. All right? Using the platform, maybe I've got a SQL database as a back end for that. Instead of firing up a virtual machine that I now have to manage as a SQL server running on 2012 R2, maybe what I want to do is just upload my database and say, hey, please put this on your SQL cluster for me in one of your instances and give me an opportunity to connect to that at home or in the office through SQL Server Management Studio. So now I'm only talking about the platform that I want to turn around and run my services on. Okay? That's platform as a service. Now, software as a service is probably the easiest one we're looking at. Software as a service is one of the areas that everybody seems to have the most confidence in, because really we're talking about things such as Office 365, online software, Google Apps you might have heard of as well. But by and large, we want to be able to produce software that's going to be used by our end users online, not packaged here in my office. Okay? So that's kind of an idea of where these are coming from. Let's take a closer look at these. Now, this is a slightly more in detailed look, but really the difference that we're talking about here is not so much what we've done, it's more of how much of it am I responsible for. So when you're talking about packaged software, this little area over here, our pretty little package, this area says, I'm doing this in my office. I've installed this on my computers. I'm managing those servers. I'm dealing with the network itself and any of the challenges that come with that. I'm doing all of this. Everything here is my responsibility. However, once I jump into the cloud, now we're going to start seeing I have options here. How much do I want to actually manage? Well, if the choices you've made, I've set up virtual machines, or I've chosen to use web roles, or built a website, or uploaded a database, whatever the case may be, these elements, these tables here are basically going to describe what my role is. So for example, infrastructure as a service basically means I will handle the operating system, the middleware, the runtime. I'm remote desktoping into these machines and the applications that I've chosen to install on those virtual machines. Everything down here is basically the host. This is the HyperV server that at Microsoft that's handling all that for me. I don't have to worry about, as I would in my office if I created a virtualization cluster of HyperV servers in my office, that I have to manage. All I'm dealing with is the virtualized environment at this point with my virtual machines. The servers, the storage, the networking, and by the way, scale-out storage is a wonderful thing. When I run out of space at my office, I got to run out and I got to buy more disks. I got to buy more drives. Online, Microsoft just says, oh, by the way, here. Okay? You're going to pay for it, of course, but you have immediate scalability as far as that's concerned. Now, that's infrastructure as a service. Platform as a service. Now, I'm only concerned about the data and the application that I've actually uploaded, the website itself, the SQL Server database. Those applications that are running on Microsoft's virtual machines that they've fired up for me, I don't see them, I don't remote desktop into them, I publish my website to a web role. I upload my database, and I'm going to show you a little bit later on how incredibly easy this looks. Okay? Then when you get down to software as a service, you're really not doing anything. Okay? At this point, you're like, for example, Office 365. At this particular point here, my email, those email servers are happening up there. All I've basically done is I've gone to my online Outlook, like a web access type of scenario. They are handling everything. I am managing nothing more than my pricing and what I want to purchase, and really basically my Azure account. And that's software as a service. Now, what we're beginning to see is that today, most of the time, every organization out there that decides to tiptoe into the cloud, they're going to have chunks of this all over the place. They're going to have different combinations of each one of these. They may choose to get Office 365 just for Office, but then they'll turn around and have virtual machines they've built themselves because they want to completely and entirely manage the application that they've installed on that. Maybe it's a third-party application that they've chosen to install on a server that has to be configured a certain way. And then maybe they turn around and just used the website role to upload their website. So you're going to have a giant combination of all these different elements. Now, Windows Azure itself is extremely flexible. Okay? It's open source. We're going to even find that Microsoft has even gone down the pathway of working with Linux as well as far as this is concerned. Now, in most cases, when we're talking about flexibility, the idea is, who are we flexible for? Are we flexible for me, or is it just easier for everybody else up there? Azure now has a very easy web interface to work with. It's using a lot of open source or open-ended, not necessarily just code, but they are handshaking with practically everybody out there. You can fire up a Linux server if you want to. You can install a Linux server in the cloud on one of Microsoft's virtual machines. And they have support like we've never seen, actually. Many of us who've gone out of our way to create virtual machines with Linux on them, that used to be a pretty challenging scenario because of the drivers and such. They've worked this whole thing out for us. Now we're talking about building and deploying and managing applications across a global network of data centers. Microsoft has, depending upon the article that you read and the way you want to look at it, there are actually 8 and new ones coming up, and by the time we see this later on, we may even have more data centers globally located so that we have all kinds of backup and fault tolerance in each one of these different regions. The interesting part about that is you turn that around, you start digging a little deeper, they actually have hundreds of little data centers all over the place supporting this solution. As a matter of fact, when you go out of your way to create services or create VMs or upload websites, you can literally pick the region in which you want those services to be most widely available. Now, Microsoft Azure does bring quite a bit to the table, okay? One of the things we're going to be looking at in a little bit closer detail is cloud services. And the question becomes, what are we talking about as far as cloud services? Isn't that kind of everything and possibly nothing? Yes, yes. That's what we're dealing with. Cloud services could be as little as, by the way, can you handle my DNS? Can you handle my AD? Can you handle my entire data center as far as that's concerned? Can you handle my storage? Can I back up my database to the cloud? That's really all I care about. I don't really want to make it available to anybody. I would like to be able to back up my database to the cloud, which is an outstanding solution because Microsoft gives you 30 days of full restoration points, point-in-time recoveries, up to 30 days as far as SQL is concerned. The websites. We have, like I was saying before, we have the opportunity literally to just publish our website. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do a little demo here for you in a little bit where I'll show you how easy it is to take your company's website and literally just publish it into the cloud. We don't have to worry about all the crazy configuration settings that most of us do when we manage our own IIS servers. Virtual machines, mobile services. You can actually have the back-end application services running in the cloud when people install. So if a person installs on your app that you've developed on their phone, the back-end data services can be coming and can be stored in the cloud, available to them wherever they go, as long as they've got their internet access and their data available to them. Okay? And then, of course, media services. Yes, you can stream media from the cloud. Okay? Nothing new, it's just it's available to us now. Now, how does licensing happen? Well, the first thing I would tell you is call Microsoft. Okay? They are terrific about licensing. I've dealt with them myself, as a matter of fact, and one of the great things about Microsoft is all they care about is they want to make sure that you are getting the best licensing solution for your environment. That's what they care about. And so when they come by, they have all kinds of options. And one of the really cool ones here, you have application license mobility. Software assurance is what we're talking about right there. From that standpoint, software assurance is really an outstanding solution to work with because you get automatically, you have the opportunity to upload newer versions of the, or not upload, you have the opportunity to download and install newer versions of the software that you've purchased. It's usually a better deal because you're getting all of the infrastructure services at the same time, and you can utilize those in your environment, one of which System Center Configuration Manager and SCOM we'll talk about a little bit later on. The licenses themselves are per hour licenses in the cloud, okay? Some of those, that is. So we're going to see, as we start getting into some interesting pricing elements, we're going to see how inexpensive this can actually be. Any external applications, non-Microsoft applications, are going to be based on that vendor and their product, and that's simply something you're going to have to go with on each one of those as well. But by and large, when we're dealing with the cloud, you're going to be paying as you go, and the licenses are on an hour-by-hour basis. Now, where are we? Everywhere. The next slide we're going to talk about is going to go into great length about how many countries that you can actually put your services in the cloud and have those services available to us, okay? All over the United States. And what's interesting is anytime you go into the cloud, wherever you choose to upload that service, wherever you choose to turn on that website or to build that virtual machine, it's replicated across the entire globe. So that if any one data center goes down, your services are still up. And we'll talk about that SLA kind of scenario in just a moment. But what I've got going here is I want to show you a quick demo on how you can actually sign up for a free trial version of Azure. Okay, it's a very easy thing to do. And I'm going to be stopping this as we go along. Let me just start this. I'm actually on their web page. Okay, and I'm going up here to the free trial. And this takes me to another page. But before I go through this process, I do want to show you a few of the actual questions most people have. Do I pay anything during the trial? You do not. The trial period, as we're going to see, gives you $200, and that's for 30 days or $200, whichever you use up first. Okay? So you don't pay anything. There is, of course, as we go through this, there is something associated with the actual credit card that you do have to put in there. Do I have to pay something at the end of the trial period? Or do I have to go out of my way to hurry up and cancel before my card gets charged? Those kind of scenarios. There is absolutely no obligation to buy anything at the end of the trial. Your services just simply stop. Okay? And wait for you to modify your subscription to start one of the pay-as-you-go licensing plans. And here's one everybody gets excited about. What happens if I go over? What happens if I spend more than $200? What happens if I forgot to turn off that virtual machine that I fired up 3 weeks ago? Oh man, what's going to go on? Well, what happens is if you exceed your $200, your 200 free credit, they suspend your free trial account. Does not mean everything gets dumped. They suspend it, and you can optionally upgrade your trial to be pay-as-you-go Azure subscription. At that point, if you want to continue using the paying for the services, you're good to go. If not, no billing takes place. As a matter of fact, all they use the credit card for is actually just to get you in there and to prove that you are who you say you are. Okay? There's nothing that my card wasn't even charged when I did this. Now, what we're going to see here is we're going to go back into the free trial area. And this is actually, I just recorded this as I went through to give you an idea on the timing that's associated. I'll let you know when we get to a point that does take a moment. First thing you have to have, and one of the things you have to have, is a Windows Live ID. Most of us already have one of those. If not, you can simply create one with whatever email address you may have. Get one, or you can create one with Outlook.com, or you could use whatever Windows Live ID you've already utilized. Now, once you sign in and they get an idea of who you are, then the easy stuff begins. They automatically populate from your Windows Live account some of the information. There is a work phone that is in fact required here. This is not necessarily the mobile verification code. That could be any phone. They just need to know that they're talking to you. They're going to send you a text message. And that text message comes immediately on your phone, and they're going to ask you to put in the verify code. This way, they know they're talking to a person, and they know that they're talking to you. Okay? At least the person that is going to be associated with the credit card that we're dealing with. Now, once that's actually been verified, I'm going to actually bypass, you agree to the agreement, and all of a sudden the credit card business, which I've already filled in for at this point, you then just simply click go, and there you are. Now, this element here took maybe about a minute when I went through it. I just didn't want you to have to wait for the whole thing to actually happen. So it's going through, but you'll notice right here, inside of this area, this is going to continue to run. This area right here, we're going to see how much money we got coming to us. Okay? We see our subscription. We see the order IDs and the account administrator in this case, which is an account that we're actually not utilizing. You'll notice at the top it says, hey, we've set up the billing for this subscription. Please refresh the screen. I'm going to go ahead and erase that guy there. And now it's going to refresh. And you see, here we are, 30 days, 200 credits remaining. Says when your credit expires. I'm actually going to go over here. We're going to see it go into the pricing calculator to give you a little bit of an idea. This pops up a whole new screen where you can begin to see some of the services details in what you've actually been utilizing at this point. Now this is just app services. There's also virtual machines, mobile cloud, all the way through this process that you can go through. Now, for all intents and purposes, I now have a subscription. That's all there is to it. Look at what you get to take advantage of. Usage details, change payment method, change subscription, partner information. It's a very simplistic solution to log into. Now, all I'm going to do at this point, I went up and clicked Portal, and there's Patrick. I am not Patrick, this is the other guy. And there's a small little tutorial to go through. But what's really interesting about this is how simple it is to move in and around this web interface. And there's the last one that describes a little bit of what's going on down at the bottom. Okay, the error section, and here we are. Most of these elements should look relatively familiar. Compute, app services, network services. You can go in and under compute, there's websites, virtual machines, a mobile service that supports the back end of an application that I wrote for a phone. Okay? All kinds of interesting elements. Look on the left side over here. Everything you see. If I wanted to create something new, guess what I click? New. Really wish I could make that a lot harder for us because then I'd look really smart, but there's just not that much to it. It's a relatively simplistic solution to be working in. So we're ready to get started. Now, let's get out of this guy. And let's talk about cloud services. What is a cloud service? How does platform as a service, cloud service deployment look for an IT guy? What are we building here now? In most cases, infrastructure as a service, we already know as an IT department. We have built the virtual machines in our environment. As a matter of fact, you can literally move the virtual disks into the cloud and build new virtual machines right off of those. It's a very easy migration process. It's even easier if you're utilizing System Center Virtual Machine Manager. But let's take a closer look. We're talking about web roles and worker roles. There's a whole new set of definitions that we play with in the cloud. The web role is exactly that. When I create a new web role, I basically say I want to create a website. And that means I'm utilizing an instance of a web role. Okay? An instance of a web role. And notice here, we've got VM1, VM2, VM3. I have not built these virtual machines. This is Microsoft, who has, at this point, 3 web servers that were 3 instances of IIS that I have chosen to upload my website to. I could do 1, I could do 2, I could do 3. This could be considered an availability set, which those of us in the IT world would call a cluster back at our office, a load balancing cluster. Worker roles are really other roles that are not IIS. IIS is not installed on these VMs down here. This is simply to support maybe my database that's going on in the background. Okay? Maybe I've pushed up a database and it's sitting on their SQL servers, and this may be my instance of that database. I might find out that I need more than one for availability or whatever the case may be. The cloud service is management, configuration, security, networking, the entire element supported and managed by the folks in the cloud for us. Now, you can add instances, and that's one of the things we're going to see here. Virtual machines are actually roles with exactly one instance associated with them as an implicit cloud service. Okay? Again, this isn't one that I've gone out of my way to create. If I'm dealing with a particular role and I want to upload my application to that role, Microsoft is handling that, and that is considered an instance. Cloud services with virtual machines, multiple virtual machines, can actually be hosted within the very same cloud service. So in some cases, we're going to look at a cloud service and we're going to say, okay, this service actually is a web role, and it's actually going to have an authentication solution associated with it, from maybe Active Directory. This service also includes a database role so that I can actually have the back-end data for my application, and it's associated with that. So I can have multiple virtual machines, both web and worker role type of roles playing so that my solution can have everything that it needs. Now, you may in fact have multiple cloud service configurations. Take a look over here. This is our on-premises, right? Here's where we are. There's me, okay? Now, I happen to have Active Directory in my office. That's my authentication mechanism, okay? We also have folks that are working from home, that are outside on the internet, whatever the case may be. They're coming through the ever-popular 80 and port 443 web protocols for SSL, or just straight HTTP. And here in Azure is my web role, this little guy right here. That happens to be all of the servers or the instances of my web roles. In other words, though that number of instances I wanted to push up to the cloud, okay? I did not build those virtual machines. Microsoft is handling each one of those, and they've created this solution for me so I can actually have some sort of load balance scenario. I then maybe have this guy here with SQL. That's where I've uploaded my database. Now the interesting part about that is, because I'm dealing with web roles, and we can create things such as CNAMEs or DNS names, so that we can actually make sure that I don't have to use the website that Microsoft gives me, the .ms Outlook or Office.com or whatever those things we've seen back in the Office 365. I can still use dwwtc.com as my DNS. And Microsoft up there is going to handle that DNS for me. I could choose, in this case here, to create either two separate authentication processes. If I'm logged in locally, I'm going to my AD. If I'm going into the cloud, maybe these folks here are logging into this solution where I have a separate identity in the cloud. I could also, as we're going to talk a little bit later on, I may have AD synchronized with my cloud service. So when I create a new user down here in my office, and that person goes home and they log into the cloud and they start utilizing SharePoint in the cloud, their authentication, their username, their identity is automatically synchronized into the cloud for me. So I don't have to have two separate solutions for my authentication. And so this is just an option for us. Platform as a service deployment. Well, this is kind of the awesome stuff that goes on behind the scenes for us. Really what we're talking about at this point is Microsoft Windows Azure's data center. Now that's kind of cool. There's all of our servers, right? This is Microsoft servers that we're dealing with. The point is, I'm pushing stuff up to the cloud, and when I throw it up there, well, I'm not saying I don't get my own. Okay, these aren't just simply mine. I'm sharing this, the hardware with everybody else, but it is isolated. It's actually isolated so that my company does not have spillover or have access to data of another company that is also, like, possibly on these servers over here. We all might be sharing each one of these. The interesting thing about it is you can go out of your way to pay for that if you want to, if you absolutely need to have some sort of isolation. But by and large, the solution in and of itself does isolate that for us. And you can actually, if you ever have an opportunity to set up System Center Virtual Machine Manager in your environment, you can see how you can build that very same solution in your own office, because quite possibly in its cloud services, you're creating a new cloud, maybe in your office you have a business need to have each department isolated on separate solutions within the same hardware, but where you can go back and say, okay, this much computing was associated with that business unit. The sales team, we're charging their department this much money because on our cloud, that's the resources that they actually utilize. No different from what Microsoft is actually doing here for us. This becomes a solution. What's great about this is it becomes a network load balanced solution configured for traffic. And by the way, there is a network traffic configuration that you can take advantage of. But for all intents and purposes, Microsoft is handling all of that high availability stuff for us. They're going to make sure that we are highly available. They're going to make sure that there are more than one pieces of hardware that we're sitting on, so when they do their host upgrades, we don't have to worry about downtime. Now, this is actually what we're talking about right here. Apparently, Apparently, there is a challenge, and really that should be a red exclamation point that we're seeing there. In this situation, Microsoft has found that there's a challenge with it. They are offloading that application to another server somewhere else. They're handling all the high availability and the moving for us. This is one of the great things that I, as an IT manager, don't have to worry about. Now, deployment. You're actually going to see me push up a website here in just a moment from our own office. It's actually probably available, at least until this subscription runs out. But it's a very fast and very easy scenario. It is faster because I don't have to work for this. Now, we're talking about developers. And what's interesting is developers are driving a good portion of this level of the cloud. Right now, we have developers in our organization that sit down and they build their web applications, they manage the back-end data, and because we're in a solution right now where we're managing that, as a developer, this person is responsible for not the hosts that these virtual machines are running on, but they fire up their web server. They upgrade their web servers when necessary. They go out of their way to create the connections. They handle the networking. They communicate with the networking team to say, okay, I need these ports opened and closed, or because of the choices our network team has made, maybe they have to do something different and make a lot of different types of configurations in IIS, Internet Information Services, which of course is Microsoft's web server role. So they do all of that extra work, and then find time to develop code and to upgrade and build our websites. Well, with Platform as a Service, when I upload that website, I can actually give them an environment that is absolutely identical to my production environment, because it would be in the cloud as well. And when they go in and they push up their website, they could still build a virtual machine that actually has IIS on it if they want to. They could also just simply push it up as a website and as a separate database. And because they don't have to worry about the network environment that they're in, patching the servers, making sure that the appropriate configurations are met, it's incredibly easy. As a matter of fact, one of my developers was telling me he used to work for a company, he walked in and they simply said on his first day, okay, by the way, fire up a new set of virtual machines for him, and they had his own isolated set of virtual machines to create and develop in, and it was exactly identical to their production environment. So pushing it into the cloud is incredibly easy. Applications go from idea to availability much, much faster. We also have the fact that it is cheaper. Okay? There's less admin management work to do, and organizations are going to spend far less money supporting that application. As a matter of fact, Microsoft will in fact do the Windows updating for you on your own virtual machines that you create in the cloud. I don't even have to, when the upgrades come along, I can actually move my application. And I don't mean I'm going down the road of opening Visual Studio and pulling it off and putting it up on another server. Maybe we go from 2012 R2 to the next server or another service pack or whatever the case may be. In order to do that, all I do is go through the web interface and move it. I don't have to go through any overbearing type of data migration as we would. When I'm in my office and I have to go out of my way to migrate from one version of a server or service to another, there's an entire backup and restore and a gigantic 300-page Microsoft document that I have to go through to make this thing happen. In the cloud, you can move from one version of the operating system to another version of the operating system with little or no downtime. And that little or no downtime depends on how many instances, of course, you have. Now, PAS is also lower risk. Platform does more, leaving fewer opportunities for error. One of the greatest things about humanity is the human brain and our ability to think and our ability to make great decisions and our ability to do wonderful things, and the creativity. Also happens to be one of the best places to make a mistake. And those mistakes can be incredibly, incredibly terrible if you're not too careful. So we're taking a lot of the human element out of this. Microsoft will actually, in the background, if I happen to have what we call an availability set, so I fire up a couple of web roles, multiple instances, when Microsoft does their upgrades, they're only going to do one portion of the availability set at a time, because they maintain, if I have at least 2 instances or 2 VMs, whatever the case may be, Microsoft is going to give me 99.95 SLA uptime, which is like 4 hours a year. Okay, that's pretty amazing. Okay. Now, the deployment process, it's actually better off. And as a matter of fact, they say it's better, but really that's what everybody's actually doing. There are a lot of organizations have started out in the cloud by saying, you know what, let's start with Office 365 and put our email in the cloud. You're in the cloud. That's not, you don't have to have an Azure. You're not going into Azure just to say, I'm going to be in the cloud. Office 365 is also cloud, okay? So you've tiptoed into it there. Then all of a sudden you come to the realization that you want that hybrid environment. You want your AD in the office to be linked with your AD in the cloud. And so you can have a hybrid environment. And then you're going to turn around and say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take these servers that we're running locally. Instead of me going out and buying more hardware and upgrading and managing it, I'm just going to move that. I'm going to convert it to a virtual machine, and I'm going to place that in the cloud for me. So I'm going to have both infrastructure and performance as a service, platform as a service, at the same time. It's just simply going to start to mold into that scenario. Now, websites. Awesome. This is where it gets really exciting. We're now talking about throwing up my web server, getting rid of my web server, and pushing my website up into the cloud. You have this interesting little scenario here. You've got shared and you've got reserved instances of your website. Now, we're not saying it's that many copies of the actual data. We're talking about instances. It might as well be a farm. I can say, I need to have 100% availability all the time. And if I'm going to try and make that happen, and I know Microsoft in the background is maintaining their servers, I'm going to create 3 instances, which is going to give me 3 load-balanced servers, in my mind, to work with. Whereas in the cloud, if I use shared resources, okay, if we're using shared, what's great about this is I'm basically sharing other people's instances, IIS. I'm running on Microsoft's web server right alongside several other websites. Again, isolated. We are only going to be seeing our data. Is not going to be touching anybody else's data. That's not what we're talking about. But I can literally say, you know what? We're doing a lot better. The site seems a little bit slow. Let's go ahead and give ourselves some more instances. So you grab this little slide rule and you drag it a little bit to that direction. This is what it takes, and it's challenging, but that's what I have to actually do to get more instances thrown out there. Oh, look, now I have 2. Okay, it's not like I've built web farms before, and it's a considerable amount of fun to get all of those servers up and running and to get them all connected and to make sure the site and the stateless or stateful applications and all that kind of stuff. Here, all I'm doing is saying I want more than one instance. Microsoft is going to replicate that for me. But these are all shared instances. I could use a reserved instance if I feel it's absolutely necessary. And a reserved instance just puts me off to the side. I'm my own instance. And it gives me the ability to make some configuration changes associated with that. Now, as far as I am concerned, it matters not to me whether I'm sharing instances or I need to create my own. Maybe there's a policy within my organization that we must have our own reserved instance that basically says, even though here I have 2 shared, this one never goes away. Okay, I can scale back because I'm using less. I can add more because I need more. This one is a different this is a different application. It gets its own instance. It's that important. It's a line of business application for my company. I could say I have 2. Build more and more and more and more, just for availability or for not high availability and for better throughput. It's the slide rule. It's awesome. There's not much to it. Okay? Now, let's take a look at this little guy here. What I'm looking at is actually a website. Okay? Let me go into this guy here to begin with. I'm going to start and build a website. What should I click on? Look at that. Okay, so you put in the URL. Notice here that it actually says @azurewebsites.net. I could choose what region I want this to be in, and I create a website. Now this really doesn't take hardly any time at all because I'm just setting up the website, setting up my instance. And there it is. And by the way, I did not speed up this video. That's how quickly it happened. And then you can go to it. Now, for all intents and purposes, this is what we're looking at. This web app has been successfully created. This is a lot like the IIS-7 page. It's a placeholder file that gives me the opportunity to go in and upload. Notice down here, I can publish my content with Git, FTP. Web Matrix is what I'm actually going to use today because I think it's an outstanding tool. You do have to install it locally on your system to be able to manage and push your website up into the cloud. It's an extremely useful tool. However, at this point, I'm actually going to go back, close that out, and I'm back into my main window. You select the site, and now I have the opportunity to go through. Now, I've already installed Web Matrix for you. There's no reason for you to watch me go through that. But immediately, when you click on it down here at the bottom, this is what you get. Now, I'm editing a local copy. It's creating a local copy for my remote site. Okay? Now, it's just an empty site that I will now copy my files into it. Look at what we end up with here. Here's Demo 1 DWWTC hosting. But at this point in time, I'm going to open my folder locally on my machine. Now, what I've done is I've actually copied to my desktop, or to my workstation here. This DWWTC folder is one of the pages of our website. It's the About Us website. I just saved that as a web page with all of the files that go with it, threw it in that folder. So right now I'm opening up that folder as an actual website so that I can basically synchronize that to the cloud through Web Matrix. Here it is. Okay. There's our home page about Dynamic Worldwide. There's a few things we actually have to do, though. Look what I'm clicking on over here. This is download the publishing profile. What's interesting about this is I used to have to go in and say, okay, here's where I'm publishing. I'm going to use WebDev to publish it. I got to find out. I got to call Microsoft. I got to find out what the logins are for this. I got to find out what the ports are for this. All of this crazy stuff. Or this is my website. See? This is demo-dwwtc. In there, I can actually download the published profile, which I will import into this website when we get to it. So I'm going to end up saving this in a directory where I can get to it and then upload it or import it into Web Matrix. So now I go to Settings. And this is what I had in there before. So now I'm going to import my profile. And there you are. Test it. Yay. So now we have everything I need. Web Matrix now knows how to get to it. Microsoft just gave me the file to work with. So notice it gave me a web config file for those of you that are web developers. Now, one thing I do want to point out, I'm highlighting check compatibility. I need to make sure that the code running in my site has all the necessary extensions and technologies in the web server. And you can PHP, you know, ASP.NET, MVC, all of this kind of all these technologies are available. It's just a matter of what I need to install up there. Now, I'm not going down any crazy roads as far as this is concerned. I could check compatibility to say, hey, will this run up there? Do they have everything installed for me to be able to make this happen? And if not, I'm redirected to a page where I can make that, I can fix that solution. However, you'll notice when I click over to publish, it's going to automatically do this anyway. It's going to check it first, make sure everything's okay, and then upload the files. Notice it's using PHP, said that that's actually available. Zing, up we go. And down here at the bottom, it's being published, and I have this down at the bottom, this link that I'm about to click on, which is my site. Now, it is azurewebsites.net, okay? That's okay. I know I'm going to make that dwwtc.com one of these days. And when I do that, it's going to ultimately give me the, an opportunity to create the CNAME for that so that people can be typing the appropriate stuff to it. Here's our website, okay? Looks exactly as it does if you go to dwwtc.com and click About Us at the bottom. You're going to actually see this very same web page. Okay? But that's how easy it is to put together your website. This took me, I stopped this as we went along, but it really didn't take me much more than a couple of minutes to upload our site. And since I don't have to worry about all of the crazy networking solutions and opening the ports and all of that, this is just happens. It's a wonderful solution. Now, virtual machines. Now we're getting into a little bit of the infrastructure scenario. Virtual machines, we're going to talk a little bit about how Microsoft makes these for us. And really, to be honest with you, there's an Azure pack. You can actually download an Azure pack, and you can run this very same view in your office against your own HyperV servers to get this same type of functionality. We'll talk about persistent drives and machine portability. Now, there are a lot of things that aren't actually on this slide. Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2012 R2, 2008 R2, every new thing that comes out, Windows Linux, okay? You can go into a number of different platforms of Linux to play around with. You can, and what's interesting is these are images. I will literally, you're going to watch me go in and say, I'd like a Windows Server 2012 R2 machine, and can you throw SQL Server on that for me? And I'm going to name it this, I'm going to join it to my domain, go. And it builds that for me. Now that takes about a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, but when was the last time you provisioned a SQL Server in 2 to 3 minutes? Okay? One of the beautiful things about the cloud is how quickly these items can be provisioned. From a standpoint of portability, my data center, that's where everything is. Okay? I am now, this might as well be a giant fence. That's where my stuff is. When it's in the cloud, it's available everywhere. Okay? And it's available 24/7. I can even take my Hyper-V. Let's say that these servers here are Hyper-V hosts. I have 3 virtual machines down here. I could literally publish one of these virtual machines to the cloud. Moving these VMs to and from the cloud into my own environment is a very easy, manageable solution. As a matter of fact, we teach a lot of classes, a lot of virtualization classes here at Dynamic Worldwide Training, and most of our labs are, hey, look what you can do. We actually log into the cloud, and we back up our databases to the cloud, as students do, as a matter of fact. So it becomes, it's a very easy, a very interesting lab to watch, because it's amazing to watch students' faces when they say, okay, so where would you get the simulation? I said, no, you're actually in the cloud. That's how long it took you to build that solution. Like, wow, okay, that's cool. You know, and that's a nice thing to watch. Now, this is the direction that we actually go. There are a lot of other choices out there from virtualization from that standpoint, but Microsoft has gone out of their way to make this a very easy migration for you. For you to move what you have in the office into the cloud, especially given the fact that the platforms that you're using right now happen to be the same platforms. They use Hyper-V servers. That's what they use. That's Microsoft. So when you're moving your virtual machines to a Hyper-V host in the cloud, the reason it's so nice and easy is because you're working with the exact same systems. No lock-in. You know, when I'm done, you know what? I've decided that I am not going to pay for these machines anymore. Shutting them off. Turning them off. I don't get charged anymore. This is not like I just bought some sort of phone and I now have a 2-year agreement kind of scenario. This is a pay-as-you-go type of scenario, which gives you the ultimate in availability and versatility with your IT department. Now, you also have persistent drives. I don't want to give you the impression, these are cool looking little hard drives, I don't want to give you the impression that Microsoft is going to take this one and say that one belongs to you. It's not what we're actually talking about. We're talking about virtual machines that we want to have a persistent drive with. And what that means is storage, the storage world out there literally does say, I'm going to move things in and around. Some of your more expensive storage devices will say this VM or this volume or this LUN is such a, it's getting a lot of input output. Let's dynamically move it into some higher level drives that are actually going to run faster. There's a lot of that going on to begin with. I can go out of my way to say, this is the persistent drive area that I want to be in. And I want to attach a persistent drive to my VM, if I wish. Maybe for an application or backups that I'm choosing to do within the operating system and so forth. So I have this opportunity, and Microsoft does allow this type of scenario, but when they go down the road of saying you have these persistent drives, these things get replicated all the way around the planet. Okay? And within each one of these solutions, you have, it's not necessarily a mirroring scenario, but what basically takes place is I have availability. If one fails, it's automatically fired up on another drive over. So we're basically talking about Microsoft's expertise in high availability from a standpoint of hardware and software. The best part about it, each one of these regions, we told you we were going to say, hey, let's build this virtual, or let's put this website, put it in this region over here. I want to build a virtual machine. I want to put it over here in this region. That's where my virtual machine is sitting. But guess what? It's automatically replicated to another area. In the event of some sort of outage, and it might not even be Microsoft. It might be an internet outage for a particular provider. An internet provider may be having challenges, may go down. You know, that's okay. You're still available here, even if this area is unavailable. Okay? Now, what I'd like to do, this is actually the very end of it, but let's take a look at what it takes to build a virtual machine in Azure. Again, not a very challenging solution. Virtual machine. Now, I'm going to stop this right here. There is a from gallery that I can go with. They have a lot. I can create templates to utilize. They have a lot of built-in images that are already there. I'm not about to slap in a CD and start installing the OS. That's not what's going to happen here. It's asking me, what's the DNS name? Because as we all know, it might not be the same as the computer name. Here's the DNS name, and it has to be unique. And so when I start typing this thing out, we're going to see that as we're typing, it's like, oh, no, that's not unique. Okay, there we go. See it? Oh, no, there we are. Now we're good. Okay. What do I want? Look at your options here. Well, your options here at this point are pretty bountiful, okay? We have all kinds of elements here. We're talking about, I decided to make a Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center Edition of Windows. That's what I've chosen to go with on this one. What cores would I like? How many cores would I like? And I'm going to give it the administrative username and password that's going to be utilized when I go to remote desktop into it. Because I am going to RDP straight into the cloud, straight into this machine. Which, of course, requires an extensive password. And where do I want to place this? Where is it most likely to be utilized? Now, this took a little bit longer, so I'm not going to go out of my way to make you watch that. So we stopped it and cut some of the time out of this scenario. But what's interesting about it is it's actually done and running now. But what you might not have seen flicker across that screen too well is that this thing took, I don't know, maybe a couple of minutes, 5 minutes or so to build. But after about 3 minutes, this connect button you see down here was available to me. It was still provisioning. I was able to log into it. Okay, which is a little interesting. I'm not crazy about doing that. I'd like to see it finished before I start going down that road. But for all intents and purposes, you're beginning to see a lot of the options that you have down here at the bottom. Now the server is actually running, and there's the DNS name. You can select the server, as I'm about to do. One of the interesting things about it is this gives me, this is a dashboard. Okay. I'm actually going to hold off this for just a second. Eventually, it is running. I will start to see a graph here. This is my task manager for all intents and purposes. I can see the entire thing. I can go through the portal. I can view applicable applications and services associated with this. Okay. At this point, though, I've got to go in and configure this. I can monitor, I can deal with the endpoints, which I'm about to, and then I can make different configuration changes to the server. What I'm going to do, in this case here, I'm configuring it. What RAM, how much RAM did I want? Is this an availability set or a cluster, if you will? Okay. Endpoints is what matters. Look at what I've got here. If I'm going to remote desktop into this thing, and by the way, look what you can play with PowerShell. Okay. If I'm going to remote desktop into this scenario, by default, the private port is 3389 for remote desktop. That's a private port. However, the public port is a randomized, crazy 55,000 number in this situation. That's not going to be the same every time, and that's what's interesting about this. When you build these virtual machines and you're going to RDP into them, your networking team needs to either open that port for you every time you create a machine, or you may choose to simply edit this thing. Now, typically you do want some sort of public port that doesn't look like 3389, okay? Typically that's what you want to do. I did it just so that I can quickly and immediately log into this scenario, okay? And so now it's actually going to refresh the screen there, and when I clicked connect down there, now that I know I can go to 3389, I go back to the virtual machine, make sure that one is selected, and I go down here and connect, which opens up an RDP session with my virtual machine. Check it out. I got this little RDP file and the obvious scenarios at play with RDP. Whether I'm at home, whether I'm at work, wherever I am, this is the cloud. And so, because it's not a domain member machine as of yet, I didn't go down any of those paths. Here I am. And I'm logging in. This is all real time as well. I didn't change any of this. Now, I did stop it at this point because it's the first time I profile, so we'd sit there and say, hey, we're working on things. Okay? So, that's the end of that scenario. At any rate, that's how easy it is to build a virtual machine inside of Azure. Now, workload options. What else can I do? What else is available to us? What can we play with? Now, in many cases, we had a data center, and it seems so foreign to me to think that there's nothing I have to do, nothing I need to manage. Really, they're just going to take care of all of it? I would really feel a lot better if I could monitor some of this stuff a little bit more than just going in and dealing with a virtual machine and checking out what its throughput is and all of that kind of stuff. A lot of the things that you can actually play around with, these are supported Windows Server applications. SQL Server 2012 and 14 is now in there. We also have, you could deal with Server 2008 R2, 2012 R2, SharePoint 2010 and 2013, BizTalk 2010 and 2013, and System Center 2012. Now, System Center is great. You got your System Center Configuration Manager, you've got System Center Operations Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, which is paramount if you're going to have an on-premise virtualization solution, which, by the way, System Center Virtual Machine Manager also allows you to manage Citrix and VMware's hosts as well, which is kind of nice. But it also allows you to manage to and from the cloud. There's an interesting lab in that class, too, where we have System Center Virtual Machine Manager in, and we start moving our virtual machines into the cloud as part of the actual class. So we have all kinds of things that we get a chance to play around with. Most times, as I said before, people don't just simply run out and throw everything into the cloud. There's always going to be hybrid solutions. And with a hybrid solution, there has to be some sort of synchronization of my data or some sort of connectivity with my data. So there's data synchronization, there's SQL data sync, which means I can actually have a web application running in the cloud that utilizes a database that's in the cloud that is actually synchronized, similar to an always-on availability group, with my database in-house. So while people are buying stuff on the web, I've got people internally working on the application locally and modifying the database down here, and it's automatically synchronizing those changes into the cloud. You have application layer connectivity and messaging across the service bus, secure machine-to-machine connectivity using Windows Azure Connect. And also site-to-site network connectivity utilizing virtual network. We have all kinds of options to literally mirror the environment that we're in right now in the cloud. Now, one of the things I want to point out here is actually this SharePoint solution. Take a look at what you can bring to what you have here at the table. At the very, very top over here, cost efficiency, extremely high. You have auto high availability, fault tolerance, friction-free scaling, self-provisioning, management, and scale. That's the Office 365. I can go in and I can say, I'm creating my users in the cloud. I have a friend who actually goes to small businesses, and he sells the Surface Pro and the Windows Phone and Office 365 subscriptions. That's what he does. Because you get your SharePoint, you get your email, you can build applications. You can choose to then turn around, if you wish, start going into Azure and start building major database applications and websites. But one of the things about SharePoint is it happens to have the ability to have a web portal as well for your internet-facing scenarios. Down here, SharePoint Infrastructure as a Service, 100% of API surface area is available to you. Easy migration of existing apps within your SharePoint solution into the cloud. Roll your own high availability, disaster recovery, scaling, all that wonderful stuff. Okay? Down here, SharePoint on-premises. I now have full control to size and scale. Actually, control is a wonderful thing except for the fact that you have to do something now. I'm not a big fan of work. I kind of like not having to work. And so I kind of have a tendency to start leaning up towards this direction over here. But the cost of having a SharePoint solution in-house, pretty high. Pretty high. I've got management that has to take place. I have machines that have to be constantly updated. A SharePoint solution can have several servers, 2 web front ends. You could end up with 2 application servers behind the scenes, clustered SQL database servers. It's a pretty expensive solution if you're planning on doing it on premise. Now, here's what we're looking at, and this is what they call a sample. Notice it does not say simple. It is a sample SharePoint farm configuration. In this case here, I have my Active Directory, okay? I happen to have my applications on premises here, but I have a VPN tunnel connection that's going to constantly be allowing me to synchronize not only AD1 with AD1 over here, but maybe I also have a separate set of people that are logging into my SharePoint solution who are not members of my domain. This is my cloud service Active Directory. In the cloud, I've got my 2 back-end SQL servers, as we were talking about, application servers, web front ends, all kinds of interesting things. And then the outside world is connecting through port 80 and 443, or whatever the case may be. Or they could be working on premises coming through the VPN tunnel. You're not paying for all of that. Okay? You're not paying for each one of those crazy little machines that we're dealing with. You're paying for a solution. And solutions, as we all know, are cheaper. 80 running on infrastructure as a service. This is my corporate network. Looks familiar, doesn't it? Well, there's my SQL servers, IIS, AD, DNS, and all of that other kind of stuff. I can then turn around and virtualize all of that into the cloud, only now I have load balancers off of a public IP to work with, and I can actually mirror this. Some people look at the cloud as an opportunity to have a hot site for their infrastructure should something happen in the environment. I mean, let's face it, if you are in downtown Miami, there's a little water issue maybe going on down there because every time the tide comes in, we've seen it on the news and all that, there's things that happen. There's tornadoes, there's fires and all that wonderful stuff. The cloud can also be a hot site for you to immediately flip the switch and start using and start paying for it when you need it. Now, there are a number of different ways that you can manage a hybrid environment. Okay, with Windows Server 2012 R2, there's a lot of crazy manageability that we get a chance to take advantage of right through the new OS itself. But the System Center suite is extremely useful here. Now, what's really interesting about that is this little guy right here. There's Configuration Manager. I have my internal AD. I'm doing in this case here, I've got my domain controller in-house. I am synchronizing that so that up here, people are on the cloud, people are going through and looking at all of my different resources. This is my Azure. These are all of my VMs that are associated with it, okay? And out on the internet, how am I connecting to it? Yes, you can connect to it with iOS. Okay, Microsoft, as I said, they are very, very flexible. We now see more and more built-in compatibility with Apple, with Linux, and the like. As a matter of fact, you can even run PowerShell in VMware right now. In vSphere, you can run PowerShell. There's several commands that you can take advantage of. So, taking a look at this, I'm already used to making System Center Configuration Manager manage my internal data center. I'm already doing that. My System Center Configuration Manager, I'm pushing out updates. I'm making modifications. I'm firing up workstations and machines. You can also use that System Center Configuration Manager to manage these guys as well as VMs in the cloud. Microsoft actually encourages you to take an active role in managing the virtual machines that you've chosen to create in the cloud. Now, granted, you have the opportunity to say, hey, Microsoft, go ahead and handle the updates for me. I'm okay with that. Knock yourself out, okay? That's great. But maybe I want to I want to push apps out to those VMs. Maybe I wish to make configuration changes in the way the applications run on those VMs. And I can do a lot of that stuff. I can even handle licensing. I can do what they kind of call journaling to see what's being utilized and what's not being utilized. So I can reevaluate my licensing solutions. Okay? And that's just System Center Configuration Manager. You can also take advantage of SCOM, System Center Operations Manager. Wow, I got to tell you, that's a great place to be, SCOM. Because what SCOM does is it allows me to sit. And when something in my network is not copacetic, I'm going to hear about it. It's going to say, hey, you know what? You told me to let you know if the hard drive in this volume goes within 20% of free space, and you said let you know. We're kind of there, which means I can react to it, and I can fix that problem before it becomes an issue or a ticket that somebody calls me. That turns the entire IT department, as it should be. Do we even have an IT department? I don't know. I never really see the guys. Okay, they're out there somewhere. I never heard, do we have any problems? Maybe we don't need an IT department. Well, we have an IT department, but they're monitoring it with SCOM. And you can use SCOM to monitor your virtual machines inside of the cloud as well. To monitor your cloud services so that it's not that we're worried about challenges. What we want to know is, am I getting a lot of utilization on these? Is the storage that I've allowed myself, am I about to automatically bust out and have more storage space that I'm going to end up paying for? What are the trends of the utilization of my systems? And Operations Manager is beautiful for that. You can actually go all the way down the line with all the System Center products. There happens to be Data Protection Manager, an outstanding tool for backup and restore. As a matter of fact, one of the great things about Data Protection Manager is when you go in and you set that up to start backing up most of the, you can throw the client on most of your workstations. End users will then want to restore previous versions. And the previous versions we may know about in Windows 8 and 7 and Vista is taken over by Data Protection Manager. And the list they see in on their workstation is actually the available restore points that I've configured through Data Protection Manager. You also see App Controller. App Controller is somewhat of a light version of System Center Virtual Machine Manager, where I can take my development team, my developers, and I can say, you know what? I'm handling the network here, but if you need to provision your own virtual machines, here's an easier version of System Center Virtual Machine Manager to make that happen. And I can use that to allow them to provision utilizing templates that I've created, pushing machines into the cloud, and so forth. There's obviously Operations Manager, okay, Advisor, Orchestrator. Now, Orchestrator is kind of interesting because Orchestrator is a workflow manager. If you dive deep into Service Manager, IT Service Manager, which is similar to a ticket type of software, you can actually set this thing up where when a ticket comes in, my help desk people can say, okay, here's the problem. I'm going to click this button as a solution. That button is programmed to have Orchestrator go down the pathway of doing something. Maybe it's building a virtual machine. Maybe it's creating a user. Maybe it's unlocking an account. This is the workflow behind the automation behind my Service Manager, and it connects with every one of these. I can say Operations Manager finds out that a LUN is short on space. It tells Orchestrator to make that LUN grow. Is kind of the direction that we can actually go with. And all of this, when you're running these on premise, you can actually use these to manage in the cloud, which is outstanding. So, at this point, you are now highly educated in cloud services and everything that you can take advantage of. Windows Azure provides a comprehensive set of services you can selectively compose to build your IT environment inside of the cloud. The 99.95 SLA, if you have multiple instances of the virtual machines or whatever the case may be, the cloud solution is now a place where we can have a backup and recovery, a disaster recovery, or a highly inexpensive, very inexpensive solution. We're talking pennies by the hour is really what these things boil down to. So, I hope you've enjoyed the session that we've had today.